Hello, 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 and good morning. Happy Thursday, good people. We are so excited to have you as a part of our Manifesting Inclusion speaking series today. Today, we are welcome with two great guests. We're bringing you back another show that's every single Thursday at 1 o'clock if you want to join us Eastern Standard Time. But today's topic, we're going to be talking about how to hack diversity and breaking down barriers and building access in different spaces. So, if you're here with us live, we are so excited to have you. If you're watching us after the show, we are excited to have you as well. Please feel free to engage in the comments at any time. Before we get started today, we want to go over a couple house rules and also an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. So, down at the bottom, you will see a little arrow, or you can use guided assistant prompts to get to that arrow, and it's a share button. Please feel free to share this conversation. We would love to not only have you engage with our professional development community, but also welcome new people into the space and share this message. Second, you will see a react button down at the back. So you'll see some hands, a heart. At any point in the show, if you hear something that resonates with you or really hits your heart, please react. Our guests absolutely love that, and we'd love to see what also resonated with you during the show. Last but not least, at any time, you can turn on closed captioning by pressing the CC button at the bottom, as well as engage with us via text, and we will see your comments, and we'll be sure to answer any questions you all have at the end of the show. So let's go ahead and jump into the show. My name is Lee Miles. I am one half of the Manifesting Inclusion team, and I currently serve as the Associate Director of Inclusive Excellence at Wake Forest University. Absolutely love my job. And I'm welcomed here by my colleague, who's the other half of Manifesting Inclusion, and I'll pass it over to her.
Hello and good afternoon to everyone. My name is Laura-Gonzalez. I use she and her pronouns, and I am currently part of ownership of a company that works on education issues for refugees and immigrants. I was previously a faculty member in the School of Education and also have some background in counseling. So I kind of work at the intersection of possibility and support. And as part of the Manifesting Inclusion Project, we not only host these speaker series, which we're really excited to get into today, but we also are occasionally doing live in-person conference presentations, and we have a book project that we're working on. So there are lots of exciting ways that we hope to bring community together and involve you with us in thinking together about what does inclusion mean and how can we all together do a better job of manifesting it or making it real. So I'm going to kick off our introductions of our guests today, starting with Claribel, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit more about yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Claribel Lizardo-Gonzalez. My pronouns are she, her, ella. And I'm honored to serve as the current director of people and culture at Hack.Diversity. Through our work, we place Black and Brown technologists with internships in the tech space while also offering career development programs. And kind of what led me to Hack and kind of the passion for this work is, here's this nonprofit determined to quite literally change the world through representation, through community, through building generational wealth. And, growing up as a Latina with immigrant parents where English was not my first language, I didn't know how to navigate the corporate world and space. I didn't know who to ask for help. I didn't know how to navigate it. And I wasn't, around with people that look like me in these spaces as well. So think about what I think about is how different would it have been for me if I had a community like Hack with over 600 individuals to ask questions, to lean on. It would have meant a world of difference for me when I was navigating those things.
Wonderful. And now we'd like to hear from our second guest today. So take it away, Bertrand.
Yeah, hello everyone. So my name is Bertrand Saint-Preux, or Bertrand Saint-Preux, and I am currently the Vice President of Programs at Hack.Diversity. I have recently joined as of 2 months at this point, and I'm so excited for the work that I'm doing here, the work that we're doing to push forward our mission to break down barriers to transform the economy for the next generation of tech. I stepped into this work from actually previously being a fellow. I was previously a software engineer and product manager, and it wasn't if it wasn't for programs like Hack.Diversity and previously Code 2040 that I was a part of, I wouldn't have had the opportunity or even had a better shot at the opportunity to be having impact for my community, impact for my family, impact for the folks who look like me and look like you, and the folks who honestly don't have the opportunities within Black and Brown communities, within diverse communities. And so I'm extremely passionate for the work that we do, because not only does this allow us to be able to impact our own communities through tech, the products that are honestly throughout our world today, but also being able to build generational wealth for our communities as well. And so just excited to be here.
Thank you both for sharing a little bit about both what you're passionate about and your connection to wanting to do this work. I wonder if there's anything else you'd like to tell us so that anyone listening who's never heard of Hack.Diversity before, like to help them really get a sense of the mission or what the group does. So I definitely hear sort of like networking and providing role modeling and possibility models. I definitely hear improving the tech space for Black and Brown folks so that it's not only representative, but like works well and lifts up your voices, your stories, your images. What else do you want people listening to know about Hack.Diversity? And either one of you can take that.
Yeah, I would say Hack.Diversity is a company, an organization that's looking to break down those barriers. So through networking, through upskilling, not just teaching you whether it be data structures and algorithms, which are those are the things that we know that our fellows learn from schooling through the various avenues that they've stepped into tech. We upskill you in how do you show up once you're in the door? How do you show up to get into the door? When it comes into the networking, is many of the ways that folks land their best and their most successful jobs is through that network, through helping you show up there, knowing that tech is a place, and corporate America is a place that folks from marginalized groups often experience microaggressions. How do you show up uh, in face of that so that you can still reach your goals? How do you show up so that you are able to have impact without letting the noise uh, bother you in a way that prevents your own impact? And so that's some of the work that we do. But Claribel, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, so I think what's kind of unique about Hack is it's kind of works on like a two-prong model of not only supporting our fellows through what it is being in the corporate space, but also we work with host companies in their DI journey. Because you'll have companies that might have some well-established DEI programs or departments who may have ERGs that are fully fleshed out, but then we also work with companies that don't know where to start. And I think that's, it takes a lot of just work to be able to build these systems that are equitable and inclusive. And so I think that's what's great about us, that we kind of meet you where you're at and try to support you to be able to do that in a sustainable way.
I'd love to take a moment and talk about some of those barriers as you all alluded to. So, as someone who recently ended a job search, I was trying to get into DEI spaces in education or ed tech. And so it was really hard to navigate everything from the applicant tracking system to networking to trying to even understand what tech was coming from the field of higher education. And so, what are some of those barriers that people trying to gain better financial access or work for companies like what did they have to go through to get into it, and how do you all break down barriers?
Yeah, it's a lot of what you've just named in terms of the job search, the application process, the interview process, which all within them have their own hurdles and biases. In the job search, it's finding a company that is going to be aligned with you as a person, that you don't feel as though you're going to have to uh, check your whole identity at the door before walking in. And so the companies that we work with are folks that are receptive to uh, DEI, improving themselves and their practices to be welcoming folks from diverse backgrounds. And then within that as well, the application and interview process. How can we support our fellows in understanding the little tips and tricks that you can do to help yourself pass the vibe check that companies often uh, have unsayingly as culture. And so, how can you show up, especially as tech, software engineering, as someone who was an engineer for many years? I can say that there's a language that you don't understand from that you don't learn directly from schooling. You have to step into the industry to understand how folks speak about bugs and how they speak about solving problems. And these are things that you can be a great programmer. You can learn to code. You can learn data structures, algorithms, ML, and whatnot. But if you aren't speaking the language in the ways that the team, the hiring manager, the company, and being able to adapt to learn and grow is something that's just going to be hard. And so that's what they're looking for in the interview. And we support our fellows in improving their skills so that they can pass the interviews, as well as supporting companies in order to break down some of those unsaid expectations so that folks can actually work through and work with these companies.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that in the sense that like sometimes it could be something so simple, and that could be something like the job description. When we think about some of our fellows, they come from boot camps. They might not come from traditional educational backgrounds. So how do we remove, for example, a bachelor's degree? Do you actually need a bachelor's degree to be able to complete the job? Or does the experience from that boot camp or experience from a previous job give you those same tools? Another thing is just common language. I think in the corporate world, I know I talk a lot about like, what does it mean? When you drop the ball, or when you, just things like those conversations and those phrases that are not, that might not be something common or used when someone that comes from an immigrant family or someone that is not used to kind of that vernacular and language. And those are all things that coming into that space, no one tells you about.
Yeah, thank you both for those examples, both from the side of an individual trying to navigate the application process, but also thinking about how companies or systems can do better at taking down some of those barriers, like degree requirements that may or may not be necessary, or lingo that we use that continues to exclude people or keep them outside of the fold. If you can think of some other projects or initiatives that either you've seen that have really transformed how people can come into and belong in tech-related spaces, or maybe something that you've dreamed of and that you wish that companies would do to really help to, promote a truly foundational and meaningful sense of belonging in those spaces.
Yeah, I can take it away on this one. I can start off. I think when I think about a project or initiative, I don't think I could pick just one. I think number one is for companies to be able to build out. One is an orientation program and ensuring that every individual, as soon as they step into the organization, that they're starting with the same pool of knowledge and information. And this information can include something like user manuals and understanding how different individuals in the team like to communicate or prefer to communicate. Understanding different communication and meeting norms. I know when I started Hack, we used Slack. I had never used Slack before, and that was an adjustment. And I think just understanding those norms is important because every company is different at the end of the day. And then secondly, it's just opportunities for growth and professional development. I think this is through, yearly individual PD funds. And we also have our, internal learning and development program for aspiring and new managers. So again, level setting that playing field of knowledge for everyone in the company.
Yeah, and to add, I would say the two things that I feel impacted me the most, I'd say prior to stepping into the industry as a working professional, imposter syndrome training. This is something that I experienced from both Code 2040 and Hack.Diversity, where I had training on like, how do you show up even though you don't feel as though you're supposed to be there? You're experiencing these microaggressions. Everyone in the room doesn't look like you're the only Black engineer in the room. You're the only one thinking that like, hey, there actually might be another solution to this problem, but you're doubting yourself because this space has not been welcoming of your ideas, your ideals. There's not many folks who you've seen walk that same path before you. And so navigating that has allowed me to know I belong even when all the external noise and environment is hinting that I don't. And so it's something that you have that self-belief and supports yourself even when there are still many companies that are looking to improve their DEI practices, and there's ways to go. And even if there's a space that isn't ready yet or isn't further along in their journey, you need to be able to, and you can be able to know yourself that you belong.
So I think a huge part of this is first knowing terms like imposter syndrome. So I went to an HBCU for undergrad, and it was the most beautiful experience ever. But it was a niche environment that didn't allow me to see some of those things until I went to a completely different environment. I went to Indiana University for grad school. So from an HBCU to being like 3.5% Black folks. And I didn't know what imposter syndrome was until I read the literature. So, how do we even begin to build bridges of access with those simple things of terminology? I think some of that is self awareness of knowing where we are, but also it's supervision, it's colleague relationships. But where do we start, and where did y'all start?
Yeah, I'd say starting a good place to start, like where I started, is I was very fortunate enough to have a program like Code 2040 where they brought freshmen, sophomores in university, in PWIs, in HBCUs, and flew them out to Silicon Valley to show them like, hey, this is the experience of being a software engineer. This is all the things that you can benefit from. These are all the challenges that you're going to have, and here's how you can overcome them. So we went through. They told us what imposter syndrome is. I'd not heard of it until that point, and they shared with us like how to refer to folks about pronouns. And so it was very much more than just like tech training. It was DEI training for college students and the intersections of tech and DEI. And I think it's one of those things that if you don't know, you don't know. And so having mentorship, having folks who have walked that path, and that's why representation and opening the doors, breaking down barriers for folks is so important, so that the next person after you doesn't have to have as challenging a path because the road is already paved or is in the process of being paved.
Yeah, so I think for me personally, my educational background is actually in mental health and psychology, and so there was a lot of practices that I ended up adapting when I ended up becoming an HR practitioner. When yes, a lot of it is self-reflection. A lot of it is how do we understand, which kind of translated into a lot of leadership training, like emotional intelligence, psychological safety. How do we address impact versus intent and the difference of that? And just starting with intrinsically how you show up at work and what that looks like. What are some of the triggers? Because at the end of the day, like you might have the best intentions, but maybe the way that you say something can trigger someone else, and also understanding trauma-informed care practices in the workplace, especially in I'm going to speak for like nonprofits and social impact nonprofits, where, you know, a lot of, for example, at Hack, most of our employees are BIPOC, and so everything that we do is something that employees take home as well. And so how do we make sure that we're also practicing self-care? Because this work is difficult, but it's impactful. So how do we balance between both of those?
I really appreciate what you both are saying about what it feels like, for example, to be one of the few or the only, how that can affect your sense of, like, am I allowed to speak up here if I feel differently or think differently about things? And like, as a white-skinned person, I would also like to ask people who are in the system to think about, you know, what can a system do to be more responsive, so that a person doesn't have to shoulder all that weight, an individual doesn't have to shoulder all that burden by themselves of like wading through the imposter syndrome. So I appreciate that you also started to reflect, Claribel, on psychological safety or things that systems and workspaces can do. So I wonder if we can think more in that systems line for a minute about like what kinds of resources or partnerships or strategies could, workplaces or leaders of those systems, think about if they want to support or uplift, all the people who are working in those communities.
Absolutely. I think one is, are we asking employees what they need? Because I think when we think about equitable and inclusive environments, the first thing that we must recognize is that everyone has a different need. And I think that it comes down to asking, what do our employees want, and also being consistent with that ask, because things can change as well. So there's a few ways that, you know, I've been able through my career to translate that, and it's through pulse surveys, through engagement surveys, through listening tours with your employees, to really kind of dig in and ground yourself and what are the needs of the individuals at your company.
And to add, I would say, just, supporting your employees, listening to them. Similarly, the surveys are most important, but allowing for them to have that open dialogue, being able to speak about their own lived experiences, learning about who they are outside of work and what caused them to want to work at this company. Because for so many people, it's not just there are so many tech companies. There's so many companies that you can work at, but a lot of people uh, would love to work at a company that they align with. And so inquiring, are you working with somebody who aligns with the company for a personal reason, or they have a personal hope or goal for the company, or their growth in tech and growth in the workforce, and learning about them, because you'll see that there are a lot of similarities between folks despite their visual differences, and then they will see that there's a lot of diversity within that as well.
We see a lot of things like ERGs and ARGs and this resource group component where people come together and they're able to impact from a systemic way that impacts the company's ability to have more diversity in thought, more diversity in practices, more diversity in people, right? So, what are some things that Hack.Diversity does that you're really proud of? And what do those programs take to make them happen? So, is it a budget line? Is it a stipend? What does that look like for y'all?
I think Hack is pretty unique in that, because what we're trying to do externally is what we also try to do internally, in the sense that, you know, social impact and being able to break these barriers is something that we're consistently talking about. So for us, it's not like an ERG. It's not like having one leadership session. This is something that is consistent throughout all of our work and all of our practices. And that includes policies and, just just training and meetings, and it's literally embedded into every single part of what Hack is. But it takes a lot to get there, and it takes a lot of work to do that. And you know, like I was saying before, like every company is going to be at a very different stage. But it starts with going small, but then widening up, right? And what does that mean? That does mean budget. A lot of the things that I've experienced is you'll have an ERG, but then you don't have budget. You don't have budget to do the things that you want to do. You don't have budget for professional development or having those employees feel like they're a lot of the times some of those ERGs are filled with burden of something happens. The example that I talk about a lot is like the George Floyd example, where we had companies scrambling for what do we do, and sometimes the burden fell on the ERGs and the Black and brown individuals in that space, and that's not fair. And so how do we, it has to be support throughout every single part of the organization.
Mhm. No, I fully agree on that point. It is often ERGs that are carrying the culture of organizations, especially the culture that is most supportive of their Black and brown folks, their folks from different backgrounds, walks of life, sexuality, race, gender. And so ERGs are very much important. I think Hack is in a unique circumstance where the company is predominantly women and BIPOC and small. So having ERGs, we kind of exist as one big ERG in the way that we support each other. But having existed at a larger institution where they had, I want to say, over 10 ERGs, and it is something that very much actually caused me to want to transfer from being an intern to a full-time employee, because the folks that were a part of the ERG that I joined for Black folk were the smartest group of Black folk that I'd ever met. They are very much showing up the in what is supportive for them and their identity, and professionally climbing up the ranks, having impact beyond themselves, but also still carrying the culture for the organization as a whole, for the Black and brown folks that are there. And so I value ERGs, and I think it's something that all companies, of course, within reason and size. If they're a 20-person organization, it may be a little bit hard for you to have an ERG, uh, but still having a space, no matter your size, where folks from different backgrounds can come to support each other, can come to listen and learn. And so I am wholeheartedly supporting of ERGs and any company that is looking to invest in that journey.
I think that this topic of employee resource groups has sparked some interest in our audience, because we had somebody submit a comment, which was Dane Hansen said, "It's hard because we, the resource group folks, are the subject matter experts of our communities or cultures. So we are looked at to help educate or show support for members of the community during times of need," which again, as you've both said, it represents, an emotional burden, extra, sort of tax on your energies at work. So I wonder if we think about people who would like to think of themselves as allies or advocates, or sort of being able to support folks so that the burden doesn't all fall on these resource groups. What could you suggest for people who might be kind of starting out in an ally or advocate identity? Like, what are some steps they could take that might make a real difference? And thank you for the comment, Dane.
I'd say that something that I I think about a lot when it comes to allyship is looking within yourself. So when we think about the murders that happened in 2020 of Black folk, uh, there were allies all around who were wanting to show up for their Black friends, coworkers, family members, and they would be asking question of like, are you okay? Are you Is there any way that I can support you? And in those times, it's great and it's well intended, uh, but there's also continuing to put that burden on them to respond. And so I would say it's a twofold approach of like looking within to see how you can be supporting folks without guidance, and supporting folks and asking those questions in a way that you're not looking for a response. It is something that you can do, like in the time of the election, educating yourself, self reflecting, so that you can see the times where you have experienced microaggressions, because everyone has in some form, and relating that to how other lived other folks lived experiences can be experiencing that on a daily basis, so that you can empathize with them without them having to relive their trauma to teach you.
Yeah. Um, Triple, quadruple tap on that. I think it's, I think there's, there has to be a process of wanting to research, wanting to listen, because it's not about just, hey, how, right, like, how can I help you? It's like when you're sick and you want to bring me some soup. Like, this is not that. This is a life journey. And I think that's what gets misunderstood and mistranslated. Is like, yes, just because you may not have lived experience doesn't mean you can't support someone or support a community. But what it means is that there's a lot of work that is attached to that. You know, it's about learning what's going on in the news, but also what happened in history, which is something that is, that's the systematic work, right? What has happened? What happened in history that has created these laws, these policies that are now inhibiting people of color to be able, and marginalized communities to be able to gain access. So it takes a lot of work, and it's not a one-off. And I think it's a hard thing to kind of understand sometimes, where this is something that is, if you're in it, you got to be in it. And you have to do it in the most, having the most radical empathy and being curious and listening, because it's a lot to take in.
Yeah, definitely no parachuting in and then parachuting back out. I think when I think about the time since George Floyd was murdered until now, I know that there was maybe a peak of, support and involvement from other communities. And then I think there's also been a decline. So I think that's something we have to like really look in the mirror and think about critically and seriously.
I echo that, Dr. G. Unfortunately, here in the state of North Carolina, we had this huge surge and pump from particular resources at universities and private companies and corporations to be rerouted to spaces that were supposed to be more equitable, create more pipelines, more spaces of belonging, and to further our mission of inclusion. And all that got cut out because of what? Like, did we just do the work in 2 or 3 years and now we don't need it anymore? If anything, our spaces are more diverse and we need more inclusion. And so to cut off the funding that once gave us the ability to have more energy, to run ARGs or ERGs, and then say we're supposed to continue to do the work is absolutely absurd. And so I think a lot about the work that I do in my formalized role to think about inclusive excellence and leadership. And often we have entry level professionals being a huge part of the ERGs and ARGs, but there's not a lot of leadership in the executive suite, C suite, that are a part of those. And so, my question to you all is, just in your thought, how do we create more pipelines even into this system? And then what is one tangible thing? Maybe it's lunch. Maybe it's the welcome packet that you've seen that keeps people around a little bit more when they have to do the heavy lifting.
It's a great question. It's really a great question. Like, what keeps your diverse workforce engaged and excited about not just the work, but how the company is allowing that person to show up at work, so that they can feel that they are there to grow and not just there to be a numbered employee that is impacting the bottom line, uh, the most impactful business metrics. And it's allowing folks to, I don't think it's an answer that is going to be perfect for every company, but it's listening to their employees. Like, it goes back to folks, especially now more than ever, they are aligning their dollar with their values, and so along with that, they're aligning their time with their values. So folks will less likely to be working for a company that they don't care about, and so uh, employers could value this, and listening to what ideas employees have for making the company, the product, a better place, a better product, one that impacts the business metrics, one that increases retention. Because for the HR professionals on the call, recruiting and hiring is expensive. And so if you're able to retain your talent and keep that institutional knowledge uh, through change in companies, you will see uh, longitudinal impact. And so it's listening to to those employees, companies truly valuing the opinions and the lived experiences that come with those opinions is a way in which I think will allow for employees to feel as though they matter at the company.
Yeah, Lee, I think you asked an existential question. I think honestly, when we talk about the current state of where we are, I don't think we can ignore the political climate, the current zeitgeist that we're living in, because that ultimately affects and trickles down to all of the individuals at your company and your organization. Whether you're a company that's DEI aligned or not, I think regardless, it's going to impact all of your employees. And I think there's a level of naming it, and companies really naming and affirming to their employees that there's still a stance for diversity, and that they're still going to, have those resources and the money and the budget allotted for the resources needed for their diverse talent. I think it's having that firm stance, and two, like providing flexibility and space, because this is heavy, and it's heavy for employees. And now more than ever, providing just resources, whether that's extra benefits or flexibility or mental health days or whatever folks want to call it, but making sure that those systems are in place, because regardless of the stance that you take, this is happening. Regardless of who you are as a company, your employees are experiencing this. They go home and they see this. So it whether we want to ignore it or not, like it's the reality of it.
I really appreciate what you're saying about the political climate, and not just the election, but I mean it's been kind of like a building thing for a while, and I do think it calls on each of us to well, it calls on us differently. So for some of us, it calls us to like find our courage and figure out what we can do. And maybe for some of us, it calls us to like find our support community and figure out how we can stay safe in these times. as an example of finding your courage, I appreciate that Dane posted another comment, which was appreciating the company that they work for and how the executive leadership attend events of the resource groups, the business resource groups in this setting, and that it's been very rewarding to see the C-suite folks being engaged and taking time to sort of like come sit in space and share space with diverse members of their workforce, and that it's made a huge difference in feeling like a sense of belonging, comfort, confidence in kind of being yourself at work. And so, I think about that example of C-suite folks being, I mean, it shouldn't take that much courage, right, to come sit with one of your business resource groups, but like that example as opposed to, for example, in the UNC system right now, this mantra of institutional neutrality. And so I wonder on campuses which leaders are standing up to say, institutional neutrality is a convenient phrase that covers over people's realities, but I would rather hear your realities and not just pull the wool over my eye or stick my head in the sand or whatever metaphor you might prefer. So thank you again, Dane, for that great example. And we do want to encourage anyone else who's listening and has, a question for our guests, thoughts about, breaking down barriers, especially if we think about tech spaces or corporate spaces. So please do share your questions, your thoughts, ideas that you've seen work well in the chat, and we would love to be able to highlight them here. Do you have any thoughts or questions that you want to go to, Lee?
Yeah, sure. I have a question specifically for you two. There are a lot of folks that are thinking about layoffs, and also in our climate, this could go one or two ways based on this election. How can we be equitable or inclusive when we're thinking about layoffs or supporting people? So, hey, join this Facebook group or this LinkedIn group to try to get an opportunity to join tech. What feedback do y'all have in thinking about this upcoming climate?
I think for me personally is one thing that I learned is that there's nothing more powerful than a community. And whatever that means, whether that's a community locally, whether that's a community online, whatever that community is, regardless of what happens, it's important to have people that are aligned with you in values, in the work that you do. Um, and I think that's the first step is having that community that no matter what happens, you have people to support you throughout that process. And yeah, and that process is going to include very difficult decisions. But I think that it's also always important to have that with you at all times, kind of like a first aid kit, right? You know who are like the first 5 people you're going to call, or who is that community that you're going to lean on when X, Y, and Z happens.
I love the mention of a first aid kit. It's really, you need to patch up really quickly and get moving because we all have our responsibilities, and layoffs have been happening at the blink of an eye. And so I'm just really being prepared for the outcomes, and uh, similarly preparing yourself before a layoff even happens, building that community, that network of folks where you can reach out to them, keeping your skills fresh, your resume is up to date, so that you see what emergent trends in your industry are happening. Maybe you'll need to do a slight pivot, but understanding that you're weathering the storm. And so keeping your skills fresh and transferable, and then having that network of folks that you can speak to then land your next job more comfortably, being able to support each other, and even in thinking about what you would look to do beyond working for a company. There have been folks that I've seen that they've pivoted from working within a corporation to consulting, because their skill set is one that is applicable to smaller businesses, that are applicable to their lifestyle now, where they would like that the stability within their self to be an entrepreneur. And so it's understanding your skill set and your network and how you can maneuver through these trying times.
That's so real. I think about so many of my friends that um, they were making the big bucks, right, at some of these corporations. And unfortunately, because they have taken away inclusion, belonging departments, they are now stuck at a place of, well, where can I go? And often, I like to think of the folks that work in these spaces as people who work specifically on humanity work within a company. So how do we make them feel that there's a lot of humanity here? How do we make them feel that they belong? And over anything, how do we make them stay? So to have your people stay, humanity department leave is wild to me because those are often the core of the company. I want to encourage anyone here that if you do have any comments or questions, we would love to answer them today. However, if you're watching us at a later date, please feel free to add us and add your comments. We'd love to answer them later as well. We know that some of you all are going to be catching us on the rewatch here on LinkedIn or over on YouTube. Um, Bertrand and Claribel, just a quick question for you. Where do you see the future of Hack.Diversity, and what do you think the next 3 to 5 years could look like for what you're doing at your company?
We're dropping
This
the
is
existential questions here.
and I
We're
love these
trying.
questions. This is my favorite.
Yeah.
This is my favorite question because I just see the growth and the possibilities for this organization. I see the possibilities for all of the uh, engineers that are going to walk this organization and have major goals for themselves. And so, where I see Hack in the next 3 to 5 years is really codifying its offering within the fellowship and our ready content, ensuring that any fellow that comes through our program is they already have that base level of data structures and algorithms, but they are folks who are going to stand out in this changing workforce where companies are looking to increase the bottom line of what an entry level engineer is. They're looking in this age of LLMs, large language models, ChatGPT, where they can do, as I've used ChatGPT, it can write some really good code. It can give you a baseline, especially if you're looking at the uh, entry code that is comparable to that of an entry level engineer. And so, what we're looking to do is equip our fellows with the skill sets that can help them stand out in the next 3 to 5 years, where these large language models are going to be more prevalent. And so, how are they gaining those leadership skills to be able to guide like product managers do? How are they gaining those design thinking skills to be able to build products and then inform what we're building, what these companies are building, rather than just writing the code that does the work? Because we're seeing that's the thing that can be automated. And so we want to ensure that our fellows are able to be the most impactful folks that companies are looking for to hire in their entry level talent, and that have the highest potential of growing, have the highest potential of impacting beyond writing code, impacting and decision making to the point where maybe they're starting their own companies.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like to dream big and sky's the limit. So I would hope that in the future we're kind of popping up in other cities around the country. But just to think that in just a short time of a few years, we've built a community of over 600 alumni. And that to me is wild. Like every year we just gain more and more alumni that have come back um to mentor, that have come back to support Hack. So I can't imagine what the future will look like, and that more representation will be available, and just we'll be able to just make that change. And 2045, minorities are going to become the majority in this country. And so I just can't wait.
I know we're coming towards our closing time, but I wonder if I could just ask Bertrand in particular to share. I was looking on your LinkedIn page and I saw a little bit about the project that you did that had to do with photography and Black and brown skinned folks. So I wonder if you could just share that as an inspiring example and like an uplifting, positive example here at the closing moments.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, I love this project and I love the impact that it had for my community and all folks who don't look like the norm. And so the project was inclusive camera. It still exists. It is recreating the camera in a way that works for folks, regardless of their skin tone, their gender, their identity, or ability. And so it was something that I worked at Snapchat. We are a camera company. Snap was a camera company. And so how can we build a product at the time? How can we build a product that works for everyone as we're looking to grow our business as Snapchat operates in so many different places? And so as an engineer, I was working on the camera team saying like, wait, this camera is not working for myself. This camera is not working for folks that look like me. We're building computational photography algorithms and they aren't working the way that they should. They're working for the folks that are sitting in the room, folks of a homogeneous set. And so, but if we're looking at the impact that we have around the world, there's so many different types of people that are using Snapchat. And so I really took a look at this problem and saw how can we fix it? How can we build algorithms that are working for every type of person? Who do we need to partner with? What experts have been doing this work? Not engineers, but photographers who have been taking pictures of folks around the world. And how can we bring them in the room to inform our algorithms and also calibrate those against a diverse group of folks so that the algorithms work out of the box for every type of person. And so that is work that I was so excited to lead. It brought me into professionally the product inclusion space, the product equity space. And so I'm looking with the work that I'm doing with Hack to support the next generation of folks who, this is a lot of what I speak about. These folks who have these lived experiences are having so much of the opportunity to have this impact for their community, so that tech products, so that products that are built around the world are able to work for every type of person. All the folks that they say that they're working, but there's an invisible user, and the invisible user is likely the folks that work at the company, rather than what they state is the folks who are using the product that look like every type of person. Thank you
That
for the
is
question.
absolutely beautiful. Thank you for that. I think about that every time I get on social media and the lighting is horrible. I'm like, oh, this is not meant for Black
Mhm.
people, you know?
Yeah.
So thank you so much for continuing to do that work and reminding us of that space that even technology can be exclusive, though it doesn't have a face or a mind. It is programmed to still be so normative. So thank you so
Mhm.
much. We really appreciated having you all today. And we would love, if you enjoyed this conversation, please join our upcoming sessions. Next week, we'll actually be having a conversation with Julianne Losi, who works as an assistant director of LGBTQ at Rice University. And we'll have Jennifer Williams, who is the executive director of the Women's Center at NCCU, which is my alum and an HBCU. So please join us. And then the following week, we'll actually be talking about inclusive systems for spaces at HBCUs, specifically in predominantly Black environments. So, Bertrand and Claribel, it has been absolutely a joy to speak with you all today. Where can we find you and where can we engage with you?
Yes, add me on LinkedIn. I would love to get an invite request from you. Feel free to message me on there. It is just my name, my first name, my last name, and happy to connect.
Yeah, and the same for me. You can find me on LinkedIn. I am happy to connect. Please feel free to reach out, ask me a question. If you're looking to partner with Hack, to work with Hack in any way, very much welcome that. If you're interested in product inclusion, product equity, and how we can be building products that work for every single person, the folks that look like marginalized folks and the folks that are honestly just building ethical products, reach out to me. I would love to continue the discussion.
Thank you so much, Dr. G. Any last minute comments you'd like to share?
I just want to do a shout out to Nakia Campbell, who was one of our previous guests who was logged in today and just said that she appreciated the opportunity to learn about this organization. And so I want to add my thanks to hers and just appreciate you both for sharing your time and expertise with us.
Yes, thank you
Thank
for
you
having
all.
us.
Thank you for
Thank you
having me.
all so much for having us, good people. We are just delighted to learn so much about Hack.Diversity. So if you would like to join us back, we'll be back here next week, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we'll have our next conversation for manifesting inclusion. And if you would like to keep engaged or be a speaker at these events, please connect with us at manifestinginclusion@gmail.com or head over to LinkedIn and you can find us at Manifesting Inclusion. Have a great week, good people, and we'll see you again soon. Bye now.